Okay, time for another headphone review. This time it is the Thieaudio Cypher, and it's an over-ear open-back dynamic driver headphone that comes in at $399. I was originally a bit skeptical of this one because I was not a big fan of the Thieaudio Wraith, and this one looks kind of similar. But I actually think people are going to like this one. I actually think there's a place for this one, and so now I'm going to talk about it. So let's get going. Okay, just a quick disclaimer here. This unit was provided by Linsole for review. Big thanks to Linsole for sending it in. Of course, they haven't paid me to say anything in particular about it, and all thoughts and opinions here are my own. The MSRP for this headphone is meant to be $399, but I believe you can get it right now on Kickstarter for $329. It is actually kind of interesting that there's a Thieaudio Kickstarter here because Thieaudio is a well-known brand, particularly in the IEM space. My guess here is that headphones are just more expensive to produce, so they need a little bit more cash up front to be able to do that, and so that it's less risky to do. This time, they're using a dynamic driver instead of a plain arm, and I think that makes a certain amount of sense because it allows you to be a little bit more lightweight, a little bit more ergonomic. But apart from marketing and driver memes and technology stories and all of that stuff that you typically see on product pages, they've actually achieved a very competent tuning with this headphone. I'm kind of surprised in a good way. But before getting into the sound quality, I want to get into the build, the design, the comfort, and all that good stuff. Just a note, you do get this nice cable here. Nothing much to talk about. It's a cable. And you also get this leather baggie. It's a nice thin leather baggie, so you can pop it into a bigger baggie if you want to. But the headphone itself, we got to talk about a couple of things here to do with the design. Overall, I'm a bit mixed about the design here. You get a nice carbon fiber headband, which is intended to keep the headphone light. You get a suspension strap underneath with these padded little pieces underneath it, and that keeps it comfortable on top of the head. I have no issues with the comfort up top, but I do find it to be just a little bit on the clampy side for my larger than average head. And unfortunately, the pad depth, like the pad compliance here, it is very compliant, and that means that my ears do touch the inside of the padding material here. If you're sensitive to that, I would caution you about this one. Still, they do go fully around the ear. They're oval shaped instead of round, so all of these are good things. And the pads are also removable with a magnetic system like this. It's not going to be easy to just swap on other pads if you want a pad swap. You'll need to have something that has this same mounting mechanism. But the mounting mechanism itself is rather nice. It just snaps onto place. Very easy. Now, the visual design is certainly a choice. It's not my kind of thing, but it's fine. Then there's a part of this design that is a little bit questionable, which is this angling mechanism here for the cup swivel is rather stiff and it holds its place quite well. And while it's great that it has cup swivel, there's nothing there to really center it on your head, and their stiffness is not exactly the same on either side. So one of them is a little bit easier to move than the other one, and I just worry about that being indicative of some quality control issues. Now, I also want to note the Thieaudio Cypher is an open back headphone technically, but I would classify this as semi-open. When I put it on my head, I can still hear the world around me, but there is some attenuation there, and when I cup it like this, it does make a difference. It's just not as massive of a difference as what you would get with, something that's super open like this here. Now for drivability, I'll put the specs up on the screen here, but you shouldn't have a difficult time driving this whatsoever. Here is the impedance curve for this headphone, so you get a sense of how this is going to react if you run it from a high output impedance device like a tube amplifier. So for the sound quality for the Thieaudio Cypher, I'm going to throw the graphs up on the screen here right away, and then I'll talk about how this is for me subjectively. Using the B&K 5-2-8 here, you can see that the Thieaudio Cypher measures quite good for most of its response with some darker, softer treble. And so what you can expect with this headphone is a very mid-range focused sound. I think this is really good foundationally, just that it went slightly overboard with its mid-range emphasis and mid-range focus. It could have done with a little bit more excitement. How does this sound? Well, the first time I listened to this headphone and put it on, I thought, oh my God, the mid-range is actually shockingly good and shockingly detailed. Like, it's textured, it's euphonic, it's all of those things that you want from, that sort of lush mid-range forward kind of presentation. It lacks a little bit of bite, but importantly, what I want to highlight with this is there's no crazy, ridiculous treble peaks. There's no wild and wacky 10 plus dB resonances going on here. So if you want to give it a bit more bass and treble, you can do that without feeling the need to really get out the scalpel and be really precise and fine-grained with your adjustments. So that's good. Now, I want to move over to how this actually performs on my own head because there are some differences here, and it seems to be performing rather good on my head. Measuring headphones on real human heads, how shocking. Obviously, if you have a head that is more similar to that of the measurement rig, then it is likely to sound more like that to you. This whole hobby is deeply, deeply fraught with problems, and there's nothing you can do about it. Just make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel if you want to see more on-head results, because that's what we're doing here on the Headphone Show. Now I'm going to hit you with some nerdy stuff here. This is the measurement taken on my own head with in-ear microphones with my diffuse field head-related transfer function subtracted from the measurement. That means this is genuinely how I'm hearing this headphone. So if I do tone generation or something like that, I hear it bang on to what this shows. And that's slightly different from what you saw with the measurement taken on the B&K 5 and 2.8 because that's a different head with a different set of ears from my own. That's to be expected. But one thing that I just want to point out is that this dotted line here, dashed line here that you see, that's just a slope from bass to treble. We don't actually know what the preference bounds should be for me. But for now, think of this as a very crude guideline for bass to treble delta. If I had my druthers, I would like for a little bit more treble than what this has and a little bit more bass. I keep saying this over and over again, but like when I do my EQ and toggle it on and off, it kind of reveals like, okay, that's the bit that's missing. But apart from that, they've got something here, or at least they would, if not for channel balance problems. And so I'm just going to show you guys the channel issues that I'm having here with this headphone. I've done a tone generation sweep with this, and this is all perceptually relevant. And here you can see the left and right channels. You can see that it's unfortunately not quite as nice as what it looked before, and that's because the channels are behaving slightly differently from one another. So I'd like to see Thieaudio tighten up their quality control for these headphones. Okay, so quickly, subjective qualities and characteristics to do with this headphone. I find it to be very good for detail in the mid-range. It's very textured and nuanced for mid-range tones. The treble can be a little bit on the hazy and indistinct and softer side of things, and that's part and parcel with the tuning. And I don't find this to hit with much gumption down low, but it is tight and audible. I think the key knock against this headphone is that this does have that in your eyeballs kind of sound that the HD6 series has. So the HD650 from Sennheiser. If you don't care at all about soundstage, then this would be one to look into. If you do care about soundstage, I would skip this one. Now for some comparisons, this is close to an HD650 or 6XX with worn pads, or maybe slightly worn pads. I personally prefer the HD600's kind of sound signature, which is a bit brighter, or like the Headaudio D1, because like the tilt is a bit brighter. Or maybe this way, you'd see it this way. But if you're treble sensitive and you can't stand that so many headphones have treble resonances throughout, and the 650 and 6XX are like, you know, the perfect headphone for you, this is kind of similar. And that's high praise because those are good headphones, but I do feel the HD6 series from Sennheiser still has a more incisive treble profile overall. They sound a bit more detailed in the treble, but at the same time, those ones meaningfully roll off in the bass, and this one doesn't have quite the same bass roll off. Those ones, it's like gone. When I compare this headphone to something like the Sennheiser HD550, which also has very good mid-range, because of the rest of the tuning, I find the Cypher sounds a bit more on that like lush and rich side of things, with again just a hint of glare there that the HD550 doesn't have for the ear gain, because the HD550 has a bit more presence throughout the treble there. The HD550 can also sound a little bit on the gritty side for certain areas of the treble, but I think overall, for anybody who found the HD550 to be too bright and they wanted a lusher presentation than that, the Cypher, I think, is a good alternative. And then when you're comparing to the Hi-Fi-Man Edition XV, you get similar kinds of warmth overall. The Edition XV is a little bit more incisive in the treble in a couple of spots, but it's also notably more modal, which means it's more prone to having peaks and resonances. Still, the Edition XV and those other ovoid-shaped Hi-Fi-Man headphones are going to be much more positionally consistent. For myself and the way that I use headphones, I do value that more highly because I am the kind of person who is going to EQ basically every headphone. If you're not that person, I think you have a harder choice to make, but they're both reasonable options to consider. And you also need to factor in whether or not you like that more subdued treble presentation, right? Like they're both kind of dark. So if you don't want that, if you care more about detail and incisiveness and soundstage and all of that kind of stuff, yeah, just skip these. These are not for you. So let me give a conclusion here. And I like to rate headphones in terms of bass, mids, treble, and X factor, and comfort, of course. For the bass, this isn't the kind of bass that I like. It's a little bit subdued for my preferences. Even though it's well extended, I like a little bit more bass than what this has. For the mid-range, I think this is excellent. And then the treble is, as I mentioned, a bit on the softer side. I like it to have a little bit more energy than what we get here, but at the very least, it's inoffensive, and I gotta say it's respectable. For X Factor, while the treble is a bit indistinct and the bass is nothing special, the mid-range does come through with that kind of euphony and richness and texture that I really look for in headphones, and so I think it's fine. Overall, I like this headphone. I give it a 5.6 out of 10, but because the design is a little bit questionable for certain things, that's going to bump it down to a 5.4. And as always, if you're interested in learning more about how we do this ranking system, I have a whole video all about that, and you can see this ranking system up on headphones.com. That'll be linked in the description. This is where each of the reviewers on the Headphone Show have their overall headphone ranking lists, and you can see how we've rated hundreds of headphones and sort them by whichever quality is the most important for you. But that's going to do it for this video. If you want to connect with me, you can do so at my forum thread at forum.headphones.com, or you can chat with me in our Discord, also linked below. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye for now.